One day, you're sitting in a quiet park, watching the trees sway in the wind and listening to the birds sing. Suddenly, you notice that your mind is filled with incessant thoughts, memories, plans, worries, all happening at once. Alan Watts, one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century, invites us to reflect on the nature of these thoughts and the illusion they create. According to Watts, thought is a powerful tool, but also the source of a great illusion, the illusion of the ego. But what exactly is thought, according to him? Watts describes thought as a continuous flow of self-talk. This constant internal conversation is what we build throughout our lives and begin to identify as me. It is an endless narrative we create about who we are, what we have done, and what we plan to do. Now, stop for a moment and think, what if all this was nothing but an illusion? Watts suggests that the ego, this sense of a separate and distinct I, is a construction made of continuous thoughts. It is kept alive by the incessant self-talk we have in our minds. When we get lost in thoughts, we feed this illusion of separation from the world around us. This self-talk is like a radio that never turns off. It is always tuned to a station that broadcasts our own voice, telling us stories about the past and the future. But what happens when we stop paying attention to this radio? When we stop identifying with this incessant voice, we begin to realize that the ego is just an illusion created by continuous thoughts. This realization can be liberating. Watts argues that by silencing this self-talk, we can start to see reality in a completely new way. Without the filter of continuous thoughts, the illusion of the ego begins to crumble, revealing a deeper connection with everything around us. Now, you might be wondering, how can we stop this internal conversation? How can we see through the illusion of the ego? Watts' answer lies in the practice of meditation, which we will explore further. For now, reflect on this idea. Thoughts are just a part of who we are, and the illusion of the ego is just that, an illusion. When we hear the word meditation, we often imagine someone sitting quietly, eyes closed, in a state of deep peace. But for Alan Watts, meditation goes beyond this serene image. It is a path to accessing a deeper dimension of consciousness and reality. Watts introduces meditation as a means to cease thoughts. He invites us to understand that meditation is not just a traditional religious or spiritual practice. Unlike other forms of religious practice, the meditation proposed by Watts does not require dogmas, rituals, or specific beliefs. It is a natural process of observing and letting go. Imagine for a moment that your mind is like a lake. When you are lost in thoughts, the surface of the lake is disturbed, creating ripples that distort the reflected image. Meditation, according to Watts, is the practice of allowing these ripples to settle, letting the water return to its natural calm state. In this state of calm, the mind becomes clear and reflective, revealing the true nature of reality. For Watts, meditating is essentially stopping the attempt to control the flow of thoughts. Instead of forcing the mind to be quiet, the practice involves observing thoughts as they arise and disappear without clinging to them. It is like watching clouds pass through the sky. You recognize their presence, but do not try to hold or alter them. When you meditate, you begin to experience the cessation of thoughts. And it is in this state of stillness that something remarkable happens. The illusion of the ego begins to disappear. Without the constant self-talk reinforcing the sense of a separate I, the perception of reality changes. you start to experience the present moment in a more direct and intense way. Meditation, then, is not just a mental exercise. It is a powerful tool for reconnecting with the present and dissolving the illusory barriers we create with our thoughts. Watts believes that by practicing meditation, we come closer to the true nature of reality, a state of unity and interconnection with everything around us. Watts reminds us that this practice is not about achieving a specific state or reaching a goal. It is about allowing the mind to return to its natural state of calm and clarity. And when this happens, we begin to see life with new eyes, free from the limitations imposed by continuous thoughts. Imagine that you are in a moment of total tranquility. Without the pressure of commitments or worries, you feel completely present, observing what is around you. This is the state that Alan Watts believes to be the path to true reality, the now. For Watts, the concept of reality is closely tied to the present moment. He argues that reality is not something that exists in the past or the future. It is something that can only be experienced in the now. But how does this relate to the cessation of thoughts? And why is it so important? When we are lost in thoughts, we are usually trapped in memories of the past or anticipations of the future. This constant oscillation prevents us from experiencing the reality of the present. Watts suggests that by ceasing thoughts, we can free ourselves from these temporal bonds. When the mind is silent, we are no longer trapped in narratives of what was or what will be. We are simply here. This state of presence is profoundly transformative. Watts describes that when we are fully present, we begin to perceive life in a more vibrant and authentic way. Colors seem more vivid, sounds clearer, and sensations more intense. It is as if a veil has been lifted, revealing the true beauty and complexity of the world. But the absence of thoughts does not mean emptiness or a state of unconsciousness. On the contrary, it is a state of full awareness where we are completely awake and alert to the reality around us. Without the distraction of continuous thoughts, we can connect more deeply with everything that surrounds us. Watts also teaches us that this connection with the present is not something we need to achieve. It is something that is already present, waiting to be rediscovered. The practice of meditation is simply a means to help us remember this, to help us return to the now. As we connect with the present moment, we also begin to realize that the separation between me and the other starts to dissolve. We perceive that we are part of a continuous flow of life, an eternal energy that permeates everything. This perception is not just intellectual. It is a direct experience of unity and interconnection. Therefore, when we stop thinking and become truly present, we begin to experience reality in a way that is both simpler and deeper. It is an experience that fills us with a sense of wonder and awe, reminding us of the beauty and complexity of life. Imagine for a moment that you are lying in a field at night, looking at the vast starry sky. In an instant, you feel not just an observer, but an integral part of this vast cosmos. This sense of unity with the universe is what Alan Watts describes as the experience of being in harmony with the eternal energy that permeates everything. Watts teaches us that this sense of unity is something we can all experience, especially when we stop thinking and disconnect from the illusion of the ego. But what does it really mean to experience this unity? Watts suggests that by silencing our mind and ceasing the incessant self-talk, the sense of separation between us and the outside world begins to dissolve. This experience of unity is like a return to our deepest essence. When we are constantly thinking, we create barriers and divisions between us and others, between us and nature. However, when thoughts cease, these barriers disappear. We realize that we are not separate from the universe. We are a manifestation of it. Watts describes this unity with the universe as a feeling of being completely integrated into the flow of life. He often uses the metaphor of the ocean and the waves. Just as a wave is an expression of the ocean, we are expressions of the universe. When we stop thinking, we can feel this connection directly, realizing that we are part of something much greater and vaster than our individual ego. Think of a moment when you felt completely at peace with the world, perhaps during a walk in nature or while watching the sunset. In those moments, the mind naturally quiets, and you begin to feel a deep connection with everything around you. There is no sense of separation. You are simply a part of the whole. Watts argues that this experience of unity is one of the most profound realizations we can have. It is a sense of belonging and of being at home in the universe. And contrary to what many might think, this experience is not rare or inaccessible. It is available to all of us whenever we allow our minds to quiet and open to the present moment. He also mentions that many spiritual and mystical traditions speak of this experience of unity. For example, in Zen Buddhism, there is the concept of Satori, a moment of enlightenment where one perceives their unity with everything. In Hinduism, there is the idea of moksha, the liberation from the cycle of birth and death through the realization of unity with Brahman, the universal principle. These experiences are not merely theoretical. They are living experiences that can transform the way we perceive and relate to the world. When we feel this unity, life takes on a new dimension of meaning and depth. Imagine sitting in a quiet place, perhaps in a garden or by a river. You close your eyes and begin to hear the gentle sound of running water or the distant song of birds. Gradually, these sounds begin to fill your mind, replacing the constant self-talk that usually dominates your thoughts. Alan Watts believed that sound is a powerful tool for meditation, capable of guiding us to a state of greater awareness and presence. Watts explains that the use of sounds, especially mantras, can be extremely effective in silencing the mind. A mantra is a word or phrase repeated continuously, helping to focus the mind and block out the noise of everyday thoughts. The repetition of the sound creates a kind of rhythm that the mind can follow, which helps to establish a state of tranquility and concentration. For Watts, the practice of listening to sounds without labeling or judging them is essential. When we listen to a sound without trying to classify or assign meaning to it, we allow it to be just what it is. This helps us disconnect from our habitual tendency to categorize and analyze everything around us. Instead, we engage with the direct experience of the sound, allowing it to guide us to a state of presence. Imagine you are hearing a bell ringing in the distance. If you try to label the sound as bell and think about it, your mind is active and analyzing. But if you just listen, without labels or judgments, the sound of the bell can become a kind of portal to the present moment. You begin to notice not only the sound itself, but also the moments of silence between the rings, creating a deeper and more continuous awareness. Watts also mentions that the influence of sounds on the mind and body during meditation is profound. Sounds can calm the mind, reduce anxiety, and even alter our physical state. Think about how you feel when you listen to relaxing music after a stressful day. The same principle applies to meditation. Soft and repetitive sounds can induce a state of deep relaxation and calm. In addition to mantras, Watts suggested practices such as conscious listening to natural sounds, like the wind in the trees or the waves of the sea. These sounds, being naturally rhythmic and unpredictable, help the mind to let go and open to the experience of the present moment. Let's imagine a scene. You are sitting on the sand, listening to the sound of waves breaking on the shore. With each wave, you feel a natural rhythm, a pulse that requires no analysis or interference. Just listening to this repetitive sound can bring your mind to a state of peace and presence, where thoughts dissolve and all that remains is the sound and silence. The practice of meditating with sounds and mantras, then, is not just a technique. It is a way to reconnect with the simplicity and purity of immediate experience. By letting sounds guide us, we can find a direct path to the present, to the reality that Alan Watts so valued. For Watts, the cessation of thought is not an end in itself, but a means to a greater end. When we can calm our mind and silence the incessant self-talk, something remarkable happens. Our consciousness begins to change. Instead of being dominated by fragmented thoughts about the past and future, our mind opens to the direct and immediate experience of reality. This transformation of consciousness is like opening a window in a stuffy room and letting in fresh air. Suddenly, everything seems clearer, more alive. Watts describes this experience as awakening to the true nature of life, where the illusion of the ego dissolves and we can see things as they really are. When we stop thinking, we stop identifying with the stories and narratives we have built about ourselves. We are no longer the main characters in an incessant drama. Instead, we become quiet observers of a much larger and more complex reality. This shift in perspective allows us to see the world with new eyes, free from the distortions created by our own thoughts. Watts argues that this new form of consciousness leads us to a sense of deep peace. It is a peace that does not depend on external circumstances or the conditions of our life. Instead, it is a peace that arises from the simple fact of being present, of being truly alive in the moment. It is like finding an oasis in the desert, where we can rest and renew ourselves. A practical example can be seen in everyday life. Think of a moment when you were completely absorbed in an activity, perhaps painting, playing a musical instrument, or simply enjoying nature. In those moments, your mind was not wandering. You were fully present, immersed in the experience. This state of flow is a form of active meditation, where the cessation of thought leads to a sense of deep connection and inner peace. Watts also warns us about the difference between living in abstraction and experiencing reality directly. When we live in abstraction, we are trapped in thoughts about what should be or what could have been. It is a life of shadows and reflections, where we never really touch the substance of reality. In contrast, experiencing reality directly is living in the fullness of the now, where each moment is rich and meaningful in itself. To illustrate this idea, Watts uses the analogy of a person looking at a map versus someone exploring the land itself. The map is a representation, full of symbols and abstractions, but walking on the actual terrain is a living and immediate experience, where we feel the earth under our feet and the wind on our face. The cessation of thought allows us to abandon the map and experience the land directly. Therefore, the inner peace that Alan Watts describes is not a passive state of tranquility, but an active form of engagement with life. It is the peace that comes from knowing that we are part of a larger whole, that we are connected with all things. And this peace is one of the greatest gifts that the practice of meditation can offer us. Imagine you are having a busy day with 1,000 things happening around you. You feel the need for a moment of peace, a break to reconnect with yourself. Alan Watts offers several practical tips for starting to meditate, allowing anyone, regardless of experience, to access the benefits of this transformative practice. Firstly, Watts suggests finding a quiet environment where you can sit comfortably without being disturbed. This does not need to be a special place. It can be a quiet corner of your home, a peaceful park, or even your car, as long as you feel comfortable and safe. The goal is to create a space where you can step away from external distractions and focus on your practice. One of the simplest and most effective techniques recommended by Watts is observing the breath. Sit comfortably, close your eyes, and begin to pay attention to your breath. Feel the air entering and leaving your lungs, noticing the natural rhythm of breathing without trying to control it. Breathing is a powerful anchor that can help bring your mind back to the present whenever it starts to wander. As you focus on your breath, thoughts will inevitably arise. Instead of getting frustrated or trying to push them away, Watts suggests a gentler approach. Observe thoughts as if they were clouds passing through the sky. Acknowledge their presence, but do not cling to them. Let them come and go, gently returning your attention to your breath. Another useful technique is the practice of listening to the sounds around you without labeling or judging them. Sit in silence and simply listen. It could be the sound of wind in the trees, the singing of birds, or even the distant sound of passing cars. Allow these sounds to fill your awareness without trying to classify or analyze them. This practice helps the mind become more receptive and open, promoting a state of presence and clarity. Watts also recommends the use of mantras, which are words or phrases repeated silently or aloud. One of the most well-known mantras is Om, a simple and profound sound that can help focus the mind. Repeating the mantra creates a rhythm that can calm the mind and help cease thoughts. Choose a mantra that resonates with you and repeat it gently, allowing it to guide your mind to a state of tranquility. Subscribe to the channel and watch the video on the screen.